Welcome to When We Die Talks. I'm your host, Zach Ansell. In this podcast, we explore different beliefs about what happens when we die and how those ideas shape the way we live. Thanks for tuning in. I'm glad you're here. Hey everyone, we're back with another Anonymous Calls episode. But before we get into it, I wanted to give you a quick heads up. I'll be completely off the grid next week for a meditation retreat. That means no posts on Instagram or Substack during the week of the 2nd. Unless I come out of it wanting to move to the forest and become a monk, I'll be back online posting again on the 9th. And don't worry, there will still be an interview episode in 2 weeks, so the podcast schedule stays on track. I've been having so much fun with these anonymous calls and have already had some incredible conversations, 2 of which you are about to hear. The application list keeps growing every day, and I'm really grateful for all the folks who want to be a part of the project. I'll start scheduling more calls again mid-June, so keep applying if you're interested. And if you'd rather not do a live call, you can still leave a voicemail at 971-328-0864. That is still part of the project that I want to keep going, and with a few more calls, I'd be able to put together another voicemail episode. One last thing before we jump in, I could really use your help spreading the word. If you enjoy an episode, please share it. Post it on social media, send it to a friend, leave a rating or review where you listen. I'm working hard to grow this project, to reach more people, and I truly can't do that without your help. Now, on to today's episode. I went back and forth on pairing these 2 calls because, at first glance, they're very different, but they both explore the same core question, how we process loss and try to make sense of what might come next. I've thought about both calls a lot since recording them, and I really love some of the ideas each of them brought up. One of the callers shares how a series of traumatic losses, including the sudden death of his mom, led him deeper into Buddhism, grief work, and the mysterious experience of a sent email from his mom months after she died. The other caller is a dream therapist who worked with death through both her clients' dreams and her own personal losses. She shares the idea that maybe death meets each of us in a way we need to be met, shaped by our beliefs, fears, and the stories we carry. Just like last anonymous episode, these are recorded phone calls, so the audio quality can vary a bit. With all that said, let's get into today's episode. I hope you enjoy.
Hi there.
Hey, how's it going?
Going okay. How are you doing, Zach?
I'm doing all right. I feel like it's been a week, but I'm excited to do our call and I'm excited to chat with you. How's your week been?
Okay. It's been okay. I don't know, moderately normal, whatever that is.
Well, yeah, thank you for doing this. And I think before we kind of really get into things,
You're welcome.
I'm just super curious, and I know this could spin off into a big conversation. So maybe just like very briefly explain why you're, interested in doing this call or why you wanted to do this call.
Well,
I know that's a big question.
No, I'll keep it brief. Your Instagram page came up in my feed, probably because I tend to look at things about grief, because that's an interesting topic for me the last few years when you talk about why after. But I was just intrigued. I thought, well, this is an interesting concept that you've come up with, and it might be interesting to explore, what I think happens and see how that correlates with what other people think, and just see where the conversation goes.
Awesome, and I thank you for, being willing to kind of jump onto this, boat, or I don't know what I'm on, but this kind of weird addition that I've now added to the podcast of doing these anonymous calls, and just, I'm floored with the kind of the response I've gotten from people, and people like you willing to just jump on a call with someone they don't know. I think it's awesome.
I think it's part of the human desire for connection. And when you, I don't know about for anybody else, but when I come across people who are sort of thinking about the same things I'm thinking about, it seems like it could become an intriguing conversation, and everybody gets to learn something, maybe develop new or different ideas.
Yeah, I think it's the ideal, right, of what we all wanted from social media was to actually get connected with like-minded people and explore things. So I'm glad that you came across it. And before we really get into things, I'll just do a little icebreaker, and maybe you can tell us where you're calling from, where you live, and what your favorite book is and why.
Well, I'm currently living in Massachusetts, in a suburb outside of Boston, but I spent the last 30 years before moving up here a couple of years ago, I was living in South Florida. So that's really where I spent a lot of time. So that's where I am at the moment. And the other thing was my favorite book and why.
Yeah.
Yeah, that changes from time to time, but it's actually interesting because it's sort of germane to what we're talking about. Excuse me, I have some allergies going on.
Oh, you're okay. I'm in the same boat too. I think that's maybe why I'm feeling so like iffy right now. Is I'm just tired, and I'm not sure if I'm tired because of life or if it's just allergies. So I'm right there with you.
Right. Yeah, well, if we don't know the why, we know the what, right? So
Totally.
I don't always need to know. It's like, I don't need to know why I'm bleeding. I just need to know bleeding. Stop the bleeding.
Totally.
Figure out the wound later.
Totally.
So I guess the book changes on any given day, but I think what's been my favorite for a little while, it's a book called The 10 Things to Do When Your Life Falls Apart. It's by a woman named Daphne Rose Kingma. And I was just walking through a thrift store one day, and I don't usually look at the books in thrift stores, but I went past the bookshelf, and this thing, I saw the title, and it almost jumped off the shelf at me. So I read the first paragraph, and I was immediately hooked into it. Having been through some traumatic losses, this became like the most... It's a healing book, and I've actually bought somewhere between 12 and 20 copies online, just really cheap from various places, and I've sent them to people and they've had losses. I'm like, here, this worked for me. I don't know if it'll work for you, but
I love that.
I'll send it to you. So,
I have a book that I bought a bunch of the mass market paperbacks, and I'm not going to say I do this all the time, but I try to, anytime I'm carrying my backpack around, have an extra copy of it that I can just give away to people.
Yeah, I used to do that with a book called Illusions by Richard Bach.
That's the book that's my book.
Get Out.
Yep. That's the book that I carry around and give away. Yep.
That's hilarious. I've given 3 or 4 of those out, I think.
I love that.
Wow.
But I guess now
that's cool.
We can kind of get into the big question and see where this takes us. What do you think happens when we die?
Well, it's changed over time. It used to be, my viewpoint of it was that it was sort of the big empty.
Yeah.
So eyes closed, lights go out, all the circuit breakers just go offline. And it's unconsciousness for the rest of eternity. And then my aunt passed away a bunch of years ago, I think in the 2004-ish, somewhere around there. I went to her funeral, and I started to think, like, what happened when this woman, her name was Kay, what happened when Kay took her last breath? And when she breathed out her last breath, where'd she go? Because her body was there, but she clearly wasn't. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice if when she breathed out her last breath, she just reincorporated into the big everything? And so a little bit of her is still on Long Island where she passed away, and some of her is in Peru on top of a mountain, and some of her is in the Danube doing things, and maybe she's in the Colosseum in Rome, which was kind of interesting. And then the thought that came after that was that if I had a bottle of water or a glass of water and I threw it into the ocean, which I wouldn't do, but if I did, it wouldn't bob around without water in it. It would disperse into the bigger holes, the ocean, the bigger everything. And so that got me thinking, well, if that's the case, do we retain consciousness of who we were? Like, am I floating around as me, or am I just part of, like I think George Carlin called it the big electron? And that gave me comfort. That was the first time I ever had any comfort around the subject of death. And I was like, wow, if you just blow out that breath and disperse into the universe and become part of everything again, that's a nice deal.
Yeah, so, that doesn't sound bad.
I don't know. No, it doesn't. And years later, decades later, I think, I started looking into Buddhist concepts and came across people like Thich Nhat Hanh, and because he's the only one that's pronounceable for most people. And,
totally.
Like, I don't know who Ringyan Chopra, and I can't pronounce that. So, but I'm going to misquote him because somebody misquoted him to me, and that's how I heard it. But he said essentially, we all believe that we are waves on the ocean with a beginning, a middle, and the end. What we fail to remember is that we are all water. And I thought, oh my God, that's really close to the idea I had about Kay a couple of 20 years before. So it's not like I came up with something new.
Yeah.
It's just that the message that was always there sort of trickled over to me.
Yeah.
Which I find interesting.
Yeah. Were you like reading anything at the time, or was this just like I don't know, just that something that came to you. Like, do you feel like there's influences on this idea that came to you when Kay died? I'm curious about like influences.
I think I was flying on the plane back to Florida from New York and writing in my journal. My mom was there with me. She was probably sleeping in the seat next to me. And I just started writing all this out, and I was like, oh, I wonder if it's this. And that was it. So I don't know. So there may have been some influences somewhere, but I couldn't point to them.
Yeah.
Because it took until just a couple of years ago for me to come across that idea somewhere else and go, oh, all right. So other people are thinking about this.
Totally. I'm also really influenced by Buddhism and diving into that. So I'm curious now that you're kind of diving into that, has that changed your thoughts in any direction more, or is it just like firming up this belief of like this kind of great, I mean, it's almost like your initial thought was the great nothing, and now your thought is the great everything, or something like that.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. I guess it is almost a sort of a 180 in terms of viewpoint. I don't know. It brings me to the idea of what is truth, and I'm making air quotes when I say truth. And my thinking about that is that truth is whatever idea you've either heard or has come your way or you fabricated that helps alleviate the angst or the anxiety about whatever the subject is.
Yeah.
So, like I have family members who believe that when they die, they're going to a place with clouds and mansions, and they're going to meet and hang out with a guy they've been reading about in a book for a long time. And that's their truth. That gives them comfort. That helps them deal with the day-to-day insanity of human existence. It takes the weight off, and they're like, all right, well, that's cool. So that works for you. For other, in other religions or faiths, there's other ideas of where you go, what you do, what happens, or if you come back. I don't know, but it took away some of the darkness about it, I think.
Yeah.
Even though if it's the big nothing, that's kind of neutral.
Yeah.
So it's not a big deal, And I have another friend who I've had a lot of people try to rope me into their religions. It's so funny. They always want to sell me their particular deity's insurance policy. It's like you go with this insurance policy, you get to live forever in paradise on earth. Go with this insurance policy, you go to heaven. Go with this one, you get to be reincarnated. It's like, all right, maybe I'll just live, focus on this life that I tried to avoid for a lot of years. Yeah. And not worry so much about what's coming next, if it's anything. So it's a nice thought that we, all of us just get to be part of maybe Carl Jung's concept of the collective unconscious. Maybe it's just the collective energy of the universe. Yeah. And so far, nobody's come back to report on what's happened. Like I have not gotten a postcard from the dead, although I did get an email. So if you want, we'll talk about that at some point in this call. Yeah, I actually wasn't even thinking about that, but yeah, anyway. Yeah. But I know you kind of structure this with some questions, so I'm eager to see what they are.
No, yeah, I mean, the structure is we start with, what do we think happens when we die, and then we just see where the conversation goes. So, I mean, if you want to talk about the email now, we can talk about that, or I can ask you some follow-up questions. But in some ways, I'm just kind of leading the conversation a little bit and seeing where it goes. So, do you want to share it now?
Yeah, I can certainly talk about it a little bit. 2019 was a year of traumatic loss for me, or at least I felt they were traumatic losses when they happened. I'm starting to get a different perspective. But in the course of 6 months, my mom died very suddenly and very unexpectedly. She went into the hospital for a stent procedure that was supposed to give her more quality of life, and they were going to do more procedures, and she died an hour later in the ICU.
Oh, wow.
And and then I was going through a breakup of a long-term relationship at the exact same time. And then my cat died, and then my other cat died, and all this was in 6 months of time, like between April and September-ish.
And the universe did not let up.
No, it was emotional waterboarding. Like that's the only way I can think to describe it. It's like every time I took a breath, there was just a fire hose of more stuff. So it was rough. And that's when I started looking into Buddhism. I had already been in 12-step recovery for the effects of other people's alcoholism, addiction, and insanity in my life. So I had some, places to go to kind of process these things out. I started going to therapy. My therapist very, very presciently said, she got real quiet one day, and she just looked at me and said, be patient with yourself and give yourself time. So I guess the two stories that go with this is when my mom was being worked on in the ICU, I was about 15 feet away outside the room. And it was everything you see on TV and every movie where there's crash carts and code blues and people are running back and forth with bags of blood, and it was completely insane. And I'm standing there pretty much losing my mind.
Yeah.
And I was 50 years old at the time, but here's my mom. She's, I could hear her blood pressure numbers at like 88 over 35. And I'm thinking, that's not good. And I had an experience I've never had before or since. So I had and this is weird, I don't always share this, but I will, that I had this rush of energy that started at the bottom of my feet, went up to the top of my head, and pretty much lit me up like a Christmas tree. Mm. And at the time, I was like, well, that's adrenaline, because this is this kind of situation. And the energy seemed like, somehow I interpreted it as having a color. It was like a greenish yellow. I don't know what that's germane to, but that was in my thinking.
Yeah.
And a couple of weeks later, I was almost in a car accident, and I had an adrenaline rush. And I realized what happens with adrenaline for me is it starts in my chest, and it radiates out to my arms and legs. Mm. This started at my feet and went up through my head. And so someone once said to me, I heard them say, what are the facts and what are the stories I tell myself about the facts? So the fact is my mom was dying and I was there. Those are the facts. It's kind of it. The story I tell myself now, because it makes me more comfortable with the experience, is the way that my mom was a portal for me to come into this world as a person is maybe what happened in that moment was my mom chose me as a portal to leave.
Oh,
and
interesting.
Maybe that's what the energy was that came in. Yeah, so I walked away with that a few months later with the idea that my mom gave me the last gift she could ever give me, which was the gift of her essence, the gift of her energy and everything that comes with that in my body. And then she left to go wherever people go when they stop being people.
Yeah.
So that's that story. And so the email, this is interesting. So I went into some serious grief. I've actually been writing a book about my experiences with grief, loss, and recovery around all this. I'm about 50,000 words into the manuscript.
You're in it.
Yeah, I'm in it. And not too long ago, in part of the research for the book, I was looking for my mom's last email that she had sent, because I was pretty sure she sent an email to a good friend of her best friend, saying something like, I'm not ready to leave yet. My boy needs me. He's crushed because of everything I was going through. Mm. And I found that email, but while I was looking for it, I found something else. And she had an iCloud account that I don't think I knew about. And I looked in it, and there were a couple of emails, and one of them there was a draft. In the drafts box, it said draft 1, and I looked at it, and I'm like, okay, well, that's interesting. What was she writing? And I looked in there, and it was to the same person. There's nothing in the email. There's just a subject line. And the subject line says, I'm loving it. Now, the interesting part is that she died April 23rd, 2019. The timestamp on the I'm loving it email that they were sent is June 1st, 2019.
Whoa.
Which is 2.5 months after she passed away.
That's wild.
And so I sat with my jaw hanging down looking at it, and I'm like, okay, analytical brain says, who did, I must have done this. I must have known about the account. I must have been writing to her friend Rita. And all of that didn't happen because A, I didn't know about the account. B, there's nothing I would have been starting with I'm loving it a month and a half after my mom croaked.
Yeah, fair.
And all I could think, and I looked, I asked people who were like kind of techie, is there a way that this could have been like before April, but the timestamp is 2 months later? They're like, no. So the fact is there's an email that has that information. The story I tell myself is that somehow my mom, being the force of nature that she was, because we all think our moms are that, was able to construct just that much of an email. And I just wish I would have found it a couple of years before, because now I like the more of the story, or more of the story I tell myself is whatever it is that happens after we die, she's loving it.
Yeah.
So I don't have to worry about her. You know, it took me a week after she died to come around to realizing that she was dead and not dying. Like, I kept waiting for a phone call, a text, a thing. What do I have to do?
Yeah.
And a week later, I finally breathed. Like, oh, that's over. So there's some interesting, or quasi-interesting, or potentially interesting things.
Yeah, that's definitely very interesting. I love the language that you're using, because it's something that I've been kind of diving into a lot lately, is just the idea of the stories that we tell ourselves. And so I love that you're using that language in a way and looking at these things to help you heal, because I think that's so powerful versus, there's so many stories that we tell ourselves that don't help us heal. But that is very wild.
Oh, of course. Yeah, it's the email thing has still got me kind of rocked. And I talked to my dad about it, and my dad is he doesn't call himself a born again Christian. He calls himself a completed Jew, but he's a Jewish guy with a Jesus belt buckle. And my Jewish father is a pastor at Assemblies of God Church in upstate New York. And I told him about it. I was like, "What do you think about this?" And he very simply said, "Emails from heaven." I'm like, okay, right on. So that's his story. That's his truth. That's what works and makes it right for him.
Here's the one thing that I have to say that I don't love about this is, like, man, I was really hoping on the other side that I wouldn't have to deal with emails anymore. It's like, shoot, we're still emailing in the afterlife. Damn it.
I know. Again, I have to deal with this because that, so somehow she's either got to get to a place with Wi-Fi, or she's got to have an account somewhere. So you're still paying for this shit.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just a continuation, apparently. Oh, wow. That's wild. But, but that's brought you peace from some grief, which is huge.
It's like one piece of the piece, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't solve that with one thing.
No. My grief was heavier than anything I've ever felt in my life. There's times where I've been so sad that I pictured myself walking on the bottom of the ocean, because I figure that's as sad as I can be. Like, there is no under this. There's no, I'm going to be sadder in 10 minutes. I'm at the bottom.
Yeah.
And eventually I'll just solve the bubbles back up to the surface and I'll be okay. But, this grief almost took me out a lot of times. But things have shifted. I noticed this year when the anniversary of her passing came around in April, I woke up in the morning and I wasn't crying. I wasn't torn up. I wasn't, oh my God, I wasn't having to post 80 things on Facebook with memories and pictures. And I woke up in the morning and I was like, yeah, I'm okay. And she's okay. And I'm just going to do my work today because that's what my day is. And I don't need to, I actually went out and played tennis that day, and I know the time of her death. So I know at 4:51 p.m., I'm out on the tennis court. It's 4:47, and my tennis partner, who I know him at tennis. I've never hung out with him any other way, so he doesn't really know my life. And I said, well, in 4 minutes, it's the anniversary. This is the 6th anniversary of my mom's passing. And he looks at me and goes, oh, do we need to go out and hit more balls so you don't have to think about it? And I'm like, no, man, I'm totally fine.
Yeah.
So at 4:51, I just kind of closed my eyes and said, I guess, like a silent tribute to her. And then that was it. There were no theatrics. And, my mom wrote me an email, funny enough, about a year before she passed. And in it said something to the effect of, because she had COPD and emphysema, so she knew at some point this was going to go. And she said, when I pass, I don't want you to grieve. I want you to celebrate my life in any way you see fit. And then after she passed, I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, how am I going to not grieve you? It's like, sounds nice in theory, Ma.
Yeah. It's good in theory, hard in practice.
Yeah. So the point of all that is that the whole this has softened for me, and my grief has lessened. That's actually kind of the point of the book I'm writing, that grief lessens. And I don't know whether it's just something that has naturally happened, if it's a culmination of work that I've done to get to this point, or if my brain and body just got sick and tired of being sick and tired and flipped off some switches and said, you know what, we can't do this.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
I think that's the human in us, and I think it's at least the human, or maybe it's Western culture. I don't know. I think it's more human, but it's just like, I think there's this innate wanting to figure things out and to have a reason to explain stuff. And a lot of times it is a very black and white, this one thing. And also, in some ways to help other people in this instance of like going through grief and whatnot. But it's like, yeah, if I could tell you this one secret sauce, like do this one thing, but it's probably a culmination of a lot of things. And it's, like a little bit of this and a little bit of that and, and some of this too. And yeah, we want to have an explanation and a reasoning and clarity. But at the end of the day, it's like, I'm glad that you, using your analogy, like I'm glad that you, followed the bubbles back up out of the ocean and, found yourself, and got through the grief, because that's powerful. And yeah, I mean, you are writing a book about it, and a succinct answer of this is how I got through it would probably be, a great way to finish the book and, sell millions and millions of copies of how to get through grief. But, it's not that simple, right?
It's different. No, definitely not. And I've talked to a lot of people about this, and grief is different for everyone. It's a different animal. Each person faces it differently, feels it differently, experiences it differently. I would love to say in 5 words how it works, but so far I'm at 50,000. I'm not done. I don't know where it's supposed to go. Like writing this book is a jigsaw puzzle with no box. I have no guide. It's just, here are the things I think, here's the experiences I've had. It's going to be different for different people. One thing I did was I was sitting at home one day, and I could just feel in my brain I was all out of any kind of feel-good chemicals. There was no dopamine, there was no serotonin. I was just depleted of everything and had been. And I thought, okay, well, what do you do about that? And I thought, well, like exercise, movement, get the body going. So I thought there was a disco in the city where I was living, and Friday nights and Saturday nights they had like disco dance music and bright lights and loud music and people gyrating. And I'm like, I'm going to go and see if that doesn't move some stuff around inside me. And I called it dance therapy. And I went pretty much every weekend for a couple of years. Even like COVID shut down the dance places and every other place. And I was like, no, you can't do this to me. I'll die.
I need this.
Yeah, because this all happened. And I found the dance idea in like the end of 2019, and COVID was right around the corner. So, that's part of it, but I don't know that would be part of it for you or anybody else. If I'm cooking a meal, I'm going to put in the spices that work for me. You might not like, you might put cumin in yours. I hate that. It tastes like armpits. So, it's all different for different people. That's my experience. And we weave our own tapestry around that. Whatever thread you put into it is the thread that binds it together and makes it that much bigger. And we find our way, hopefully. Yeah, let me tell you that I probably dance like a Muppet. You don't want to see this, but
I think that's even better. I was gonna say I love that.
Yeah,
it's better that you just did what felt right, and I think that is right. Maybe that is the secret sauce. The problem is, it's so individualistic and it's different for everybody, and it's sometimes even hard to know what's right in the moment. But it's like you just feel it. I didn't have as much loss as you did in 2019, but the way that you described it, I love the term emotional waterboarding. I don't love it in reality, but I've almost described, my last year of, I felt like I'm out in the ocean, and every time I come up for air, there's a wave that's coming to crash down. And, this is exactly what you're describing. And and it's hard in those times to know what feels right sometimes, because it's like, am I just being lazy and avoiding going to do something? But I think deep down you really do know, like, hey, you know, this is something that feels right, and I'm just going to go with it and see what happens. And I think that's for me over the past couple of years. I've really just dug into meditation, and that learning about meditation led me to a book that sounds similar to the book that you mentioned was your favorite book, of like When Things Fall Apart. It's such a great one just to know that, like, I don't know, there's so much in our culture and our society of distraction, avoidance, and sometimes it's just like going towards, you know, or not sometimes, like going towards, you know, these hard things helps so much. But yeah, I love that you found something that worked.
Absolutely, and it's a combination of things. And dancing was, you know, there were a few aspects to it. One was it was, you know, bright lights, loud music, and gyrating people. The other was that I actually found a sense of community there.
Yeah,
because I started to become a regular, and I met the other regulars, and so we all just kind of made each other laugh all the time, and we would hang out after, you know, the place closed at 1 a.m, and we would hang out till 2:30 in the morning, you know, going, you know, getting pizza and silly stuff, and go home and be completely, you know, wrecked the next day. But actually the next day there would be some of those feel-good chemicals were still there.
Yeah.
You know, or I'd go out and play tennis the next day and you know, get more movement. And it's interesting, like the Pema Chodron book, I've read a couple. I just finished reading another one called Living Beautifully with Uncertainty and Change. There's a chapter in When Things Fall Apart. It's chapter 7. It's hopelessness and death. It's only like 5 pages long. I've read it 7 times. I still can't wrap my mind around it because it's literally about the idea of just don't have hope, because because hope and groundlessness can't coexist, and life is about groundlessness. You're standing on the fault line, and you're going to have earthquakes all the time. So the more hope, I guess that's how I interpret what you're saying, the more hope there is, then the less you're in the reality of what's going on. So it's fascinating, but it's antithetical to what I think we learn in society.
Yeah.
You know, you don't give up hope, you gotta have hope. And I haven't given up hope just because Pema said to, you know,
yeah.
You know. But and then the other thing, like you were saying, it's you know, this is going to work for me and I'm going to try it. But what I came around to in that time also is I developed something I called my theory of thirds. And it's essentially this: like going out dancing was a risk, because it could have been the worst idea ever. When I decided to take a risk, there's essentially 3 possible categories of outcomes. It's either going to be positive, something positive and comfortable will come from it, something neutral will happen, or something negative and uncomfortable will happen. So I have like a 33% chance of a positive outcome, which is okay. That means I can do it again if I want to.
Yep.
33% chance it's going to be neutral. Nothing changes. It's not good or bad. It's just was what it was. So now 66% of the time, by this metric, which I'm sure can easily be, you know, destroyed by any other logic, 66% of the time things are going to be either good or there'll be no change, which means
or the same.
That's okay too.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. 33% of the time it's going to be a hellscape and a shit show. So, you know, if it's one of the first 2 categories, I can do it again if I want to. If it's the third, I won't, unless I want some suffering, which, you know, in the Four Noble Truths, I hear that suffering is part of life, but, you know, it also, you don't have to go into it. So I went dancing the first night. It was positive. I came out feeling good. I'm like, oh, this is great. It's positive. It goes in that category. Yay. The next time I went, I felt sad afterwards. And I'm like, oh shit, maybe this isn't good. Like, I'm going to give it a third try. So now I'm getting like a longitudinal study on this thing.
Yeah, totally.
In 3 weeks. And overall, I could feel that it was helpful in some way, at least in the experience, at least in the moment, at least in the time I was there. I could get lost in it, and I didn't have to deal with the other stuff. And then I'd go home and not want to go to sleep, because sleep accelerates the morning coming, and the morning was the time I'd wake up crying and all of that.
The reset.
You know, so who wants that? But yeah, that was the thing. It's either going to be, and then, at some point after that, I'm reading all this Buddhist stuff, and they're talking about the same thing. That experiences are either comfortable, neutral, or uncomfortable. And I'm like, son of a bitch. Once again, I thought I was brilliant, and nope, I'm just co-opting a 6,000-year-old philosophy. Go me.
Maybe you're destined to be the next Dalai Lama or something.
I'll just, for one day, I'll just be the Dalai Lama.
Amazing.
Yeah, I don't think so. And, something else that you mentioned, this idea of like being in the ocean and drowning. And you kind of alluded to it earlier, too. Like that you and I are sitting together, ostensibly having this conversation right now.
Yep.
I think about it this way sometimes. Like the traumas that happen in our lives are like shipwrecks. So we're shipwrecked out in the ocean, and we're hold on to whatever's there, either a life raft or a lifeboat or some piece of wood or some floaty thing, or I don't know, Leonardo DiCaprio's dead body, whatever it is. And can't believe I made a Titanic reference.
It happened.
Yeah. So if we go with the analogy that we're shipwrecked out in the ocean, I'm floating by and you're over there, and we get to spend a little bit of time in each other's lifeboat for a minute or a day or a month or a year, whatever the relationship is between people. And we either float to someplace where we're safe, or we just have the safety of the lifeboat, and then we scoot out onto somebody else's lifeboat, or we let somebody else onto our lifeboat. And I think that's in a way seems to be the human experience. We're always a bit at sea, and we get to float with the people that we magnetize to here and there.
I love that.
Maybe.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Thanks.
Well, yeah, and I appreciate you just being vulnerable and sharing everything that you have. And I think we had a great conversation, and I'm really thankful that you were willing to do this.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure and it's an honor to be a part of your project. And thank you for putting this together, and for just being the catalyst for so many people to be able to share. I was intrigued when I saw the first thing. I watched the pinned posts, and then I kind of breezed through some of the other ones, and I want to do a deeper dive. But it's great. What a nice little corner of the internet for people to come together a little bit and go, I've had some pain, and I have some thoughts about life and death, and let's talk about the thing that people don't talk about.
Thank you for saying that. That means a lot. I mean, there's definitely some times where, I don't know, it feels like it's a little bit of an echo chamber, or I'm just kind of, I don't know. It's always rewarding when I get to talk to people or whatnot, but there's definitely times where I'm like, is anybody listening? And so I'm glad that it is. And I think that's, a part of starting something and, creating something, and it's part of the process. But I appreciate you saying that. And yeah, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you for taking the time.
You're welcome. Sure. And I think a lot of this is about intention. Like the intention behind the book I'm writing is just that it's going to help somebody.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yep.
If one person is helped in some way, they find one thing, yay.
Yeah.
And, if there's a reward for me too, extra yay. And if there isn't, somebody got helped and we're good.
Totally.
So thank you.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And maybe we'll have another conversation down the line, but yeah, I appreciate your time and hope you have a good rest of your day.
Sure thing.
All right. Take care.
Thank you, Zach. I appreciate you too.
Today's episode is brought to you by Amori. How was your first Christmas without your mom? How was your wedding day without your dad? If you know the pain of losing someone you deeply loved, Amori is for you. Amori is a digital time capsule that helps you reflect on mortality, navigate emotions, and create heartfelt messages for your children, so you can feel prepared and let your presence be felt through life's many moments, even when you're no longer here. Let your words become a source of strength and comfort for those you leave behind. Tomorrow isn't promised, but your love can be. Download your Mortality Companion today at amori.life. That's AMORI.life, and use the code WhenWeDie50 for 50% off.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good.
Thank you for doing this. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm like, why am I doing this? I've been thinking.
I was going to say, it's funny. That's the first thing that I was going to ask you is like, can you tell me a little bit about why you wanted to do this?
I can actually, because I was thinking about it. I mean, I guess because, well, I guess I'll just say that I'm a dream therapist.
Okay.
I work with people around their dreams.
Okay.
And so I've been doing it for about 25 years, and death comes up a lot in dreaming, especially for people who, especially, as people get closer to going on the next adventure, whatever that is, whatever happens. So I think about it a lot because it comes up with my dreamers, and and I've had my own experiences. Like both my parents have died, and I was with a really good friend when he passed, and I had two cats for like 18 years, and they just died in the last year. So, so I think about death, and the dreams have informed me a lot about dying too. And so I thought, well, this could be interesting.
Yeah, this is going to be a great way to do that. I know I kind of took us in a little bit of direction of starting to talk about death a little bit, but maybe before we fully kind of get into the conversation, I was going to ask, where do you live? And then a follow-up icebreaker question, what's your favorite book and why?
That's great, because I'm a writer. So I'm like, it's not, I'm a writer and a poet. So
perfect.
I'm happy to answer those. I live in Maine.
Okay.
Northern Maine in a small town.
Nice. And
I've lived all over San Francisco, London, and lived in Vermont for 20 years.
Nice.
Kind of all over the place. And
then what about your favorite book and why?
Okay, so I have to categorize it because,
of course,
so I really like sci-fi, and I really like the Murderbot Diaries. I don't know if you've read those.
It sounds familiar.
They are so funny and good. I mean, it's not like high literature, but it's great storytelling.
Sometimes that's what you like. I'm currently doing a class on the Eightfold Path in Buddhism. So I'm reading 2 books for that. I'm reading a 3rd book from Thich Nhat Hanh. I just finished Clara and the Sun last night. I'm reading Dante's Inferno right now. But it's like, sometimes you just need a fun read where you don't have to think too hard.
Totally. I do want to say, but so those are just like kind of fun books. But I do want to say I'm also a Dante person. So
nice.
I love, I think the comedy is definitely my favorite poem of all time. And I put like Dante and Emily Dickinson and Jean Ballantyne as and Anne Carson as my favorite poets.
Amazing.
So yeah, Dante, I have a thing. Dante and I have a thing.
Awesome.
For sure.
I'm doing this. I think it's Baylor University does it, but it might be someone else. I might be messing it up, but it's this thing called 100 Days of Dante. And so you read a canto a day.
Oh, yeah.
And then they kind of have a little video that goes along with it. So my sister and I are reading that together right now. And I think we're on the 24th day or something like that. So enjoying it so far. Definitely a journey.
So good. Oh my God, so good. Don't get me started.
I was going to say, it sounds like we could talk about books.
Right. Well, I mean, I do think that the Inferno, especially, the whole comedy actually relates to dying, because really it's about like he has a near death, he dies basically and then is resurrected in the story. Though he doesn't die, but it is about dying and death, and it is exactly about philosophy, about what happens afterwards.
Totally.
So it is really interesting.
And maybe that's the perfect jumping off point to jump into your thoughts about what do you think happens when we die?
I know something does. I don't know, but I believe that something does happen. I think it is a big mystery. I think, but like when my mom died, like I could feel presence in the room after she died. I could feel I was there maybe half an hour after she passed, and I could still feel her in the room for sure. Or that was my experience.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, and I kind of felt like her mother was there too. So I feel like there's something. I just feel like there's something. And also because I work with dreams, and I've worked with a lot of people around their dreams. A lot of people have fear about dying.
Right here, I'm one of those.
Like I work, and I think the dreams want to work with us around that. I had this one person I worked with who's very, very, very afraid of dying, and she had a number of dreams that kind of showed her what was going to happen for her. And she was of a particular faith, so the dreams were kind of around her particular faith. So it was interesting to walk with her and to show her that they were, the dreams were reassuring her. So I took that as like, learning for me too. Because, for me, dreams are this place in between. It's an in-between world. It comes from us, but there's also a mystery to it. It comes from, I think we are met in our dreams by whatever else there is, which I don't know what it is. Very mysterious.
Yeah, totally.
So I think that we are taught through our dreams about things that go beyond sort of our scientific knowing. But so, yeah, I think, so dreams have, I feel like I've been taught by dreams of other people that I've worked with, my own dreams, about like, that something happens, like something happens and there's another place.
Yeah.
I don't, I have a tendency, and I have worked with a couple of people who were approaching death. I've worked with people who, like spouses or people in their family have died. And people who are in that liminal space of dying, the dreams are very, very focused on helping with that transition. Often gently, and often sometimes not. Like my mom told me a dream. Not like harshly, but
totally.
kind of.
It's like, hey, listen.
Kind of strongly, like, yo. Kind of like,
are you getting the message?
And like, like, listen, like. Like when my mom was saying, she had this dream of a leopard and she was terrified of the leopard, but she loved animals and she wore a lot of like leopard skin clothes. And so it was kind of this kind of funny thing, but in the dream, she was very scared of it. And, but I was like, I think the leopard's coming to help you. Like it's not, in the dream, it wasn't threatening her. It was just there. And I'm like, I think it's here to help you. But she herself was so scared of dying that she couldn't really, it was hard. It was really hard for her. So, but I do think the leopard was there to help. I think there was a lot of energy coming through her dreams that was there to help her. She was rejecting it because she, quote, wasn't ready or, just was really scared.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I feel, I was raised Catholic, and so I'm not Catholic anymore, but I was raised Catholic. So I was taught this certain thing about what happened afterwards. I don't actually believe in sort of hell or anything like that, or Bardo or whatever. I just think that something does happen. And in my own opinion, I think that, and again, this comes from my working with dreams, is like how dreams work with us is very individual. So I don't adhere to like one kind of dream work, one way of being with dreams, except for the dreamer's way.
Yeah.
Our dreams come from, so they come from us and they're very tailored to us. Everything in it is very specific to the dreamer. I don't believe in dream dictionaries, any of that kind of stuff. And so our experience with our dreams, which is to me in that mysterious realm, is very individual. So for me, I think dying is very individual too. I think dying is very.
Yeah. You said something earlier about, I think it was the first client that you brought up that you said, very fearful of death. And like their dreams kind of like were showing them what things were going to be like for them. And that's not actually something that I've ever really thought about at all. But it's like there's all these things, with organized religion and outside of that too, of like, hey, this is what's going to happen to all of us. But what happens if it is individual? What happens if it's not one size fits all and it's a different journey for everybody, and in some way we get to choose? That would be kind of interesting. And I think that's part of what this project is for me, is like, I love thinking like that's not something I've ever thought about.
Well, it is interesting because if you think about like, and again, this because I'm a dream person and I've studied dreaming and I've studied dreaming in different cultures and different whatever.
Yeah.
Like, the dreams meet us. So how I'm informed about dying is how I'm informed by dreams, because again, I think they come, like the energy is all in that mysterious realm. So they meet us where we are. So if I'm a person with a deep faith, whatever faith it is, it can be, Muslim or, Judaism or, some kind of Christianity or, or any of the other 300 religions that are out there.
Totally.
Because there's so many. Or just people who are like find the place that they are in conversation with the divine or God or whatever language, by being in nature, whatever it is. Like if I have a deep faith and it's in a structure like say organized religion, the dreams meet people in that. Like I've worked with people of all different faiths and people who have no faith, no organized sort of spirituality.
Yeah.
And like, Buddhism and Zen people. I've worked with so many people. And, the dreams really speak our language. And so I just feel like dying is going to speak our language too. So if I'm a Christian and I believe that Christ is my savior, I have a feeling that whoever comes to meet us after, it might look a lot like that. You know what I mean? Because if I have such a deep faith in that, then why wouldn't I be met with that?
Yeah, I really love that idea.
Because I think the idea of universality is such a human thing. We want to be able to explain everything.
Yeah.
And say this is the truth for everything. Carl Jung was like, "There's this collective unconscious." And I'm like, no. Yes, no, not really. Because that assumes that we're all the same, and we aren't. We're connected. We're similar. But we all have our own language around everything. And I think including with dying, when a dear friend of mine who was Buddhist died, has been 15 years now, he was very devout Buddhist. He was a very strong Buddhist, practitioner. He was actually living in a Buddhist center when he died. And, and I went and was with him. I got to be with him as he was passing with his family. And it was amazing because it was surrounded with all the Buddhist, traditions.
Yeah.
And, I was just with it. I mean, I'm not anything. I'm more I have my own spirituality.
Yeah.
I believe in all of it and none of it in a way. And so, it was just so beautiful. And I just had this feeling as he was passing, as he was leaving, I could feel like he's being met in a way that works for him.
Mm.
And I don't know, and the other thing is I have, because I've worked with so many people who've had, we all lose people.
Yeah.
And, in hard ways and in normal ways, like you said one time about your grandparents dying in a normal kind of sort of natural way. And then people have experiences with people after they die. And then people come in dreams after they die. Some people believe when you dream of somebody after they've passed that they're actually coming to visit you. And, a lot of people actually believe that. And, I'm like, could be.
Yeah.
I mean, I have definitely felt my mother come to me in a dream, many dreams after she died. And it felt like it was her. So for me, it is, it's not always the thing. It's if I dream about, doesn't mean it's always them, but sometimes it has felt like, oh my God, that was her. I woke up and well, I just had a visitation. Now, do I understand that? Do I understand? I can't explain, it's mysterious, but I know what it feels like. And I know it was her.
Yeah. And I think that's part of
also helps,
that we can't explain everything.
Right. Exactly. I mean, I think science will catch up with us someday. I don't think it's going to be in our lifetime.
I was going to say, we probably won't be around.
But, yeah, we won't be around for that. But I do feel that I've just seen and heard so many stories that it's hard for me. I can't say that nothing happens when we die. I think something happens.
Yeah, and
I think for me, it's individualized.
Yeah,
because we are individuals.
What is it
going to be for me? I'm pretty sure it's not going to be a person. It's not going to be like the European version of Christ.
Yeah, totally.
I don't think it's going to be. I'm not Muslim. I'm not Jewish. But I think I have my own lexicon and my own way of being with my spirituality, and I will be met in that way.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, and it seems like you definitely.
Who knows?
Yeah, totally. And it seems like. Because that is a big part of this project for me is, the fear around death. But it seems like talking to you, it doesn't seem like there's much fear, but that there's a lot of comfort in this idea that death is going to meet you in the way that you need to be met.
Well, I'm not, sometimes when people say, are you afraid of dying? Part of me is like, no. And part of me is like, yeah. Duh. Of course I am, because I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do have comfort.
Yeah. You have some peace around it.
I have some knowing that I'm going to be met.
Yeah.
And if I'm in terror when I die, I'll be met in that place and maybe comforted. If I'm ready and going all right, let's go. I'm ready. Let's go on the next adventure. Then I'll be met with that, I think. But I have some comfort. Comfort is the wrong word. I feel in my bones that it doesn't end when I die. So that is comforting in some way. What happens afterwards? I'm a little afraid of that.
Yeah.
what is that? And, my old Catholic stuff is like, is there going to be a reckoning? Like,
yeah,
because, no one's perfect. Like I've done some, really, things, everyone's done things in their life that they regret. So,
yeah.
But, even if that's true, I do have a very strong faith in knowing that even that is met with love.
I was going to say the word that seems like that's kind of getting danced around is faith. It is a faith. It doesn't necessarily have to be, faith in religion or whatever, but it sounds like the word is faith.
Yeah. It's funny when people ask me like, well, what is your thing? I'm like, I'm a dreamer. I believe in dreams. I believe in what the dreams bring. And I have faith in that mystery.
Yeah.
Because I've seen a lot of amazing things through people's dreams, through my own dreams, amazing healing, but also amazing possibility. Yeah. So, I do believe that the energy that meets us, I think there's love. I mean, sometimes, it might be a fierce love, it might not be like, come, like, we're going to put you in a blanket. It's be like, sometimes it might, sometimes, the love that is out there, I think, in the mystery, that is what people call God or the divine or the universe, whatever. I think there is a love there, and it can be very fierce, and it can be gentle too. I can think it can be all the things, but yeah, I do, I do really believe that like we are met in a way that will work, that we need to be met in.
I think that's beautiful. And I'm curious. I think one of the things that so there's a couple things with the project of like, I at this point switch back and forth of, nothing happens or something happens or whatever. So I think there's, that kind of split. But then there's, if you go into like something happens, I think there's a lot of people that still, and I think it's part of why I'm doing these anonymous calls and kind of changing some of the interviews a little bit, because there is this thought of like the collective consciousness that you talked about, or like, oh yeah, we go back into this big energy pool. And the one question I always kind of want to ask out of that is, okay, in that is there a you still? Is there still individuality, or is your idea that you go back into this giant pool and you're just part of the pool? Which I think that's also like a weird thing to kind of consider, because that's something we can't comprehend. All we know is us and ourselves and being individuals. Right. But so long-winded way of asking, and I know you're kind of like not necessarily like super certain, but do you think, because when you talk about, like your mother visiting you and stuff, like, is that part of like there still being an individuality after, or do you see that as something different?
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. I appreciate the question. I mean, I'll just stick with my experience around my mom. My mom was both a lovely person and also really, really difficult. We had a really difficult relationship, and I think she was a little lost in her, for whatever reasons, trauma, blah blah blah. And I also loved her a lot. And so when she first died and I dreamt about her, she was lost in my dreams. She was very lost and angry, as she had been in her life. And that made me that was very upsetting to me, because I thought, if there is something afterwards, she's not doing well. I'm like, oh no, this is not okay. And then, not long, maybe a year or two after she passed, I had a series of dreams where she was just fine. And I was, very relieved. And she looked, and the last time was it the last time? One of the last times I had a dream about her, she was just like radiant and young and, full of the light that I knew she also carried besides her anger. And so it was like, I was like, oh, there she is. She found herself. Oh, that's awesome. She was like kind of being like a little, she was like being a little reassuring to me. Like, yeah, I'm all right. She's like, yeah, I'm okay. Yeah. You don't need to worry about me.
Yeah. I figured it out.
So yeah. Or something, she didn't say what, because they don't tell you what, the dreams are, I didn't think to like, say like, what's happening?
Hold on. Let me grab a pen and paper. Let me take some notes.
Let me record this. Yeah. But, I did feel reassured, and I do take comfort in that. Now, that could just be, because dreams are very individual, that could just be my worries coming up. But and people could argue like, well, that's my unconscious, and, and that might be in part true.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of a flat way of looking at it. To me, it's like, that's true, but also maybe, and also, and I really felt her presence, and I felt like I woke up feeling like, wow, something happened. And I felt really happy, because my mom had underneath her rage, she had a really good heart. And I felt really like, oh, she found her heart again. And that just
That's awesome.
made me, made me really, made me really happy, actually.
Yeah.
So so what happens? Do we go to an energy pool? I don't know. I can just say to my experience that like, I don't know that we lose ourselves. Some people would be like, oh, does that mean we reincarnate? I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no idea, but I do know that like there is something that happens, and I think that, and I do believe we are still ourselves. I don't know if that's forever. I don't know what forever means.
Yeah. I think about forever, and even with my thought of, and I think it was in on one of Alan Watts's books that I read last year, it's like, it kind of gave me some comfort with this thought of like, nothing happens. It's like, nothing is also a very, very hard thing to comprehend. We don't have experience with nothing, like absolutely nothing.
Right. Nothingness is right. Nothingness can be actually very full.
Yeah, totally.
Fully alive, as the Buddhists and people teach us, like, to be in the nothingness is to be in a great fullness.
Yeah,
so,
totally.
What if there's nothing, then that seems all right too.
Yeah.
Like, well, what is that?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I do. So I don't know big picture, but I feel, who am I? I'm just like, just a normal person in the world.
Aren't we all?
I feel like, right, exactly. But I do feel like, there's this place where we keep learning is how I look at it. I feel like we keep evolving. There's something, just from like all, my own work and working with, people for 25 years, like their experiences with people who've passed, like there's just this evolution.
Yeah.
And, and the dream, and I think the dreams have been very reassuring and also very, a little severe with us sometimes. Like, come on, like, dreams can be very fierce. So I feel feeling that dying can be kind of fierce too. In that way.
This is kind of off topic, but I love this idea of like kind of the individuality and stuff. And so now I'm like, I have just a question about dreams, because I'm a person that doesn't really remember their dreams. Is there a way that we can remember our dreams? Be better about that.
I want to say two things about that. To me, like they know we dream every night, whether we remember them or not. And I've had people who have a tendency to remember what they say is all their dreams, which I don't think it's all their dreams, because that is a lot of information. It's a lot of information.
Yeah, so, it's a big download every night.
Every night. And I'm pretty sure, I mean, what I've come to believe about this is that we're not supposed to remember every dream. That is way too much information. We'd be processing all the time, especially, for those people who dream. Some people dream in what I call movie dreams that are just like, this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened. I'm like, how would you even be with one of those dreams? And if you have 4 of them in one night, like, what are you supposed to do with all that?
Yeah.
So first of all, I feel like we're
stop
not supposed to remember
binging.
all of them.
Stop binging your dreams.
Stop it! Oh my God. That's hysterical. But it's true.
That's kind of what it sounds like.
A little bit like, so again, I think dreams are very mysterious. I think they're working, they're in that mysterious realm, that liminal, numinous place.
Yeah.
And I believe that they're working on us, and they're here for our own good. They're here to teach us. They're here to show us what our own lexicon is, our own language. Everyone has their own dialect with dreams. I think that, so first of all, it's like we're not supposed to remember every dream, because I think they're working on us whether we remember them or not. Yeah. So that's the first thing.
Well, that's good to know.
Because I don't remember. Yeah, and I don't remember all my dreams. I don't remember all my dreams either. Again, I'm 25 years, and I'm like, I wake up and I forget to write it down, and then it's gone 2 seconds later. I'm like, oh, I can't believe I forgot it. I'm like, oh my God.
Totally.
I'm the teacher, and I'm like doing the same thing. So I just want to say that. And the second thing is like the dreams that we do catch, even if we catch a part of it, usually that's the important part, is how I kind of think of it. But yes, we can we can remember our dreams better. I think dreams as a place for conversation and a place for relationship. So the dreams want to be in relationship with us. I think they have their own consciousness, and so they just want to be in. Again, they just want to talk to us. They want to be in dialogue. So if you kind of in your waking life, if you say like, all right, dreams. I mean, this is how I talk to my dreams. All right, look, okay, I need a dream, or I'm ready for some dreams, and I try to like prepare to remember them, because they do go pretty quickly, or they have tendency to. So I keep a notebook, or I keep my phone right by the bed, so I can wake up and either record it while I'm still sleepy, or I can write it down. I learned how to write in the dark.
Nice.
I have this really big notebook, and I could just like write write a few words that will help me maybe remember later. Like if I wake up in the middle of the night with a dream, I'll just never write like 3 or 4 words, and that usually is enough to help me. And when I first started doing my own work with dreams, like I also had a hard time remembering them. So I would literally drink a huge glass of water before I went to bed. And I would put a notebook and pen by the toilet. And then when I would get up, you wake up.
I'm ready.
And when you wake up in the middle of the night, when you wake up in the middle of the night, because you have to pee, you're usually in the middle of a dream and you can catch something. So that works. That works if you're like desperate.
I like the idea of a voice memo and I don't know if it's because of the podcast, but I feel like I kind of always hated writing. Like I just never felt like I was good at it, and I was very self-conscious of it. And so I think anytime I'm like, oh, I'm going to start journaling, and then, I try it for a day and I'm like, yep, okay, I'm good. But I think audio is a lot easier. Yeah, exactly. But I think audio has become such a much more comfortable platform for me. And so, I think maybe just like waking up, grabbing my phone, doing a little voice memo and being like, okay, cool, back to bed. And then I can listen to my groggy self in the morning. Totally.
And you can like have the app open that you use, that you record on. Make sure it's open. So all you have to do is like hit one button to do it.
Yeah.
It's really powerful. And once you say, yes, dreams, I'm ready to start talking to you, and I kind of want to, and you say, and I want to hear what you have to say, they will perk up.
You're opening the floodgates.
And once you kind of like, well, you're opening the door, because usually we keep that door closed because it is very mysterious. A lot of people have really hard dreams. Like, I don't like the word nightmare, but like lots of people have really scary dreams.
Yeah.
Nightmarish dreams. Those dreams are important too. They're teaching dreams. They're here to help us. Because if we're having like really, really scary dreams, it's because we've experienced something really scary and we're still experiencing it in some way and we need healing around it, or we're experiencing something scary in our life and we need to address it. So even those dreams are really important, even though they seem like so terrible. And why am I having these kinds of dreams? There's a reason. There's something we need in that dream. So a lot of people keep the door closed because, the dreams do want to work with us around our trauma as well as our becoming. Dreams aren't just about trauma work. They're also about like becoming and discovering ourselves. So you have to be willing to be like, okay, even the hard stuff I'm okay with. And I'm always like, I'm here for it.
Yeah.
Like if I feel stuck, I'm like, okay, why am I stuck? So I'll go to bed going like, I feel so stuck. Can you help me? Dreams. And then I'll have a dream, or maybe the next night I'll have a dream. So I think if you set your attention to be like, I'm ready to hear, and you can even be, I'm a little scared about what you're going to bring me, or like, or if you have a specific question, like, what is dying? You can ask that.
I was going to say, I'm going to just go with my go-to question. What do you think happens when we die, Dreams? And then maybe that'll lead me down some interesting paths. I'm sure it will lead me down some interesting paths.
Totally. I think if you kind of just take it as a consciousness to be in relationship with, they will open up. I promise.
Yeah. I love that. And not to like loop it all the way back in, but I really do love your idea around the individuality, around death and what that might mean for all of us. I think that's definitely something that I'm going to think about a lot, but this has been such a fun conversation, and I'm so glad that you were willing to be part of this initial experiment of anonymous calls. Like I didn't know where this was going to go, and they've all been different and fun and unique in their own ways. And so I'm really glad that you decided to do this. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, I hope you have a good rest of your day, and who knows, maybe we'll talk about dreams again soon or something.
Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely. You too.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of When We Die Talks. I hope today's conversation sparked some thoughts and helped you feel a little more at ease with the idea of death. Remember, this journey is all about exploring our beliefs and fears together, so I'd love to hear from you. Call our voicemail at 971-328-0864 and share what you think happens when we die. Your thoughts might just be featured on a future episode and could help others on their own journey. Until next time, have a good life.